I never thought I'd be lying in a hospital bed at 38, being told I had 2 days to live. But there I was, staring at the ceiling tiles of Street, Mary's Hospital, counting the small brown water stains, while Dr. Thornbury's words echoed in my head like a broken record. "I'm so sorry, Elizabeth. We've done everything we can. Your organs are failing. You have perhaps 2 days, maybe 3 at most. 2 days. 48 hours. That's all I had left. I should have been thinking about my life, about regrets, about all the things I'd never get to do. Instead, I was watching my husband's face, really watching it, and what I saw there made my blood run cold despite the fever burning through my body. Nigel stood at the foot of my bed, one hand gripping the metal rail. For just a moment, less than a second, really something flickered across his features. Not grief, not shock. It was something else entirely. Something that looked almost like relief? No, not relief. Satisfaction. His mother Margaret stood beside him, her thin lips pressed into a line. She reached up and patted Nigel's shoulder, just once. The gesture was quick, but I saw it. I saw everything with a sudden, horrible clarity. Dr. Thornbury was still talking, his voice gentle and kind. "We'll make you as comfortable as possible. The nurses will manage your pain. If there's anyone you need to call, any arrangements you need to make, I'd suggest doing it soon. I'll give you some privacy now." He left, his footsteps soft on the linoleum floor. The door clicked shut. Silence filled the room. I could hear the machines beeping, monitoring my failing body. I could hear traffic from the street below. I could hear Margaret's breathing, steady and calm. "Well," Nigel said finally. He walked around to the side of the bed. "Well," I looked up at him, waiting for him to say something comforting, something loving. We'd been married for 8 years. Surely he'd have some words of comfort, some kindness. He took my hand. His fingers were cool and dry against my burning skin. I thought he might cry. I thought I might see some emotion, some crack in that handsome face I'd loved for so long. Instead, he smiled. It wasn't a sad smile. It wasn't a brave smile. It was the kind of smile you make when you finally get good news after waiting a very long time. He leaned down close to my ear, close enough that Margaret couldn't hear, close enough that his breath tickled my cheek. "Finally," he whispered. "Only 2 days. Your house and your money are mine now." The words didn't register at first. My brain, foggy from medication and illness, struggled to process them. Had I heard him correctly? Had he actually just said what I thought he'd said? He straightened up, still holding my hand, still smiling. "We should let you rest, darling. Big day tomorrow." "Well, big day for you, last day rather." Margaret moved closer. She looked down at me with those cold grey eyes that I'd tried so hard to see warmth in for 6 years. "It's for the best, really. You've been suffering for so long. This is a blessing. A blessing." My death was a blessing. They turned to leave, and I heard them talking in voices they thought were quiet enough. They thought I was too weak, too sick, too close to death to hear them properly. But the dying have sharp ears, I discovered. Everything becomes clearer when you think you're running out of time. "We'll need to call the estate agents tomorrow," Margaret said as they reached the door. "Get valuations on the properties. The sooner we can sell, the better." "The house in Kensington should go first," Nigel replied. "That'll fetch at least 2 million. We can keep the cottage in Cornwall as a rental. What about the Mayfair flat? Sell it. I never liked it anyway. Too modern." They were planning my estate, dividing up my properties like vultures picking at a carcass. And the carcass wasn't even cold yet, wasn't even dead yet. The door closed behind them. I heard their footsteps fade down the corridor, heard Margaret's laugh actually laugh at something Nigel said. I lay there in that hospital bed, no longer counting ceiling tiles. I was counting years instead. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of trust, 8 years of loving a man who'd just whispered those words in my ear. 8 years of being a fool. My mind spun backward, seeing everything differently now, every moment, every gesture, every word through a new lens. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? But I knew how. Love makes you blind. Trust makes you stupid. And kindness makes you vulnerable to people who have neither in their hearts. My mobile phone sat on the bedside table, just barely within reach. My arm felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as I stretched for it. My fingers brushed the edge once, twice, before I finally grasped it. I had 2 days, 48 hours. But I wasn't dead yet, and I wasn't going to go quietly. My fingers fumbled with the phone, struggling to unlock it. The screen swam in and out of focus. I blinked hard, forcing my eyes to work. Finally, I found the number I needed. A number I'd called hundreds of times over the past 6 years. She answered on the second ring. "Hello? Mrs. Pemberton? Barbara." My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. I had to stop and catch my breath before continuing. "Barbara, I need you to come to St. Mary's Hospital. Tonight. It's urgent." There was a pause. "Are you all right? Should I call someone?" "No, don't call anyone. Just come. Room 412. And Barbara." I closed my eyes, gathering my strength. "If you help me, you'll never have to work again. I promise you that." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'll be there in an hour." The line went dead. I let the phone fall onto the bed beside me, exhausted from that small effort. Barbara Collins had been my cleaning lady for 6 years. She came 3 times a week, kept the house spotless, never complained, never gossiped. She was quiet and efficient, and I'd always treated her well, paid her fairly, given her bonuses at Christmas and on her birthday. But more than that, Barbara saw things. She was in the house when I wasn't there. She heard conversations, saw documents left carelessly on desks, noticed things that others thought were invisible. If anyone knew the truth about Nigel and Margaret, it would be Barbara. I stared at the ceiling again, but I wasn't seeing water stains anymore. I was seeing 8 years of marriage rewinding like a film. Our wedding day, with Nigel so handsome in his suit, saying vows that meant nothing to him. Our honeymoon in Paris, where he'd been charming and attentive. The first year, when he'd quit his job to support my business, but really just spent my money on long lunches and expensive hobbies. The day Margaret arrived with her 2 suitcases and her sad story about being evicted. How I'd welcomed her, given her a home, tried to be a good daughter-in-law. How she'd slowly taken over, making decisions, criticizing my choices, treating my house like it was hers. The herbal supplements she'd started making for me a year ago. "Good for your health, dear," she'd said. "Natural remedies, much better than all those chemicals doctors prescribe." I'd drunk them faithfully. Every morning, trusting her, and I'd gotten sicker. And sicker. And sicker. My hands clenched into fists despite their weakness. 2 days, Dr. Thornbury had said. 2 days until Nigel got everything. But 48 hours can be a very long time when you're fighting for your life. And I'd just declared war. The machines beeped steadily in the darkness. I must have drifted off because when I opened my eyes again, the sky outside my window had gone black. My mouth felt like sandpaper, and every muscle in my body ached with a deep, persistent pain that the medications only dulled, never erased. A soft knock at the door made me turn my head. "Mrs. Pemberton." Barbara slipped into the room, closing the door quietly behind her. She looked worried, her greying hair slightly messy, as if she'd rushed here without bothering to check a mirror. I came as fast as I could. "Lock the door," I whispered. She did, then hurried to my bedside. Up close, I could see the concern in her eyes, the way her hands twisted together nervously. "What's happened? Are you—" "I'm dying," I said bluntly. 2 days, maybe less. But that's not why I called you here. I told her everything. The words that Nigel had whispered in my ear. The conversation I'd overheard as they left. Every cruel word, every calculated plan. Barbara's face went pale, then red, then pale again. "I knew," she said finally, her voice shaking. "God help me, Mrs. Pemberton. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how to tell you." "Tell me now," I said. "Tell me everything." And she did. Barbara had been cleaning our house for 6 years, ever since shortly after Margaret moved in. She told me about the things she'd seen, the things she'd heard when they thought she was just part of the furniture, too insignificant to worry about. She'd found documents in Nigel's study 3 years ago, printouts from property websites showing valuations of my buildings, spreadsheets listing my assets, notes in his handwriting calculating net worth, liquid assets, potential sale prices. She'd photographed some of them with her phone, not sure why at the time, just feeling like something was wrong. He had a folder, Barbara said quietly, hidden in the back of his filing cabinet. I only found it because I was doing a deep clean. It had your will in it, and he'd highlighted sections, the parts where everything goes to him. I closed my eyes. I'd made that will 3 years ago, shortly after recovering from what the doctors had called a severe flu. Nigel had been so attentive during that illness, so caring. He'd suggested I update my will, just in case. Said it was the responsible thing to do. And I'd done it, trusting him completely. There's more, Barbara continued. They talk when you're not home. I hear them in the sitting room, in the kitchen. Margaret once said, she paused, struggling with the words. She said you were taking too long, that it had been 6 years already, and the inheritance was supposed to be theirs by now. 6 years, I repeated. Margaret had moved in 6 years ago. Last year, when Margaret started making those supplement drinks for you. I thought it was kind at first, but then I noticed she was very particular about them. She'd make them in the morning before I arrived, and she'd watch to make sure you drank every drop. She kept the ingredients locked in her room. When I asked about them once, just being friendly, she nearly bit my head off. The supplements, those bitter-tasting drinks that Margaret insisted were packed with vitamins and minerals. I'd drunk them every single morning for a year, and over that year, I'd gotten progressively sicker. You think she poisoned me? I said. It wasn't a question. Barbara's eyes filled with tears. I don't know, but I think something bad has been happening in that house, and I should have said something sooner. I should have warned you. You're warning me now, I said, and I'm going to do something about it. I explained my plan. It was risky, possibly illegal, certainly vindictive, but I was dying, and dying people don't have much to lose. First, Barbara would go to my solicitor, Andrew Fletcher, first thing in the morning. I'd written a new will in shaky handwriting on hospital notepaper, using the last of my strength. Everything went to Barbara now. Every property, every investment, every penny, with detailed instructions on what she should do with it all. You can't, Barbara protested. That's too much. You're the only person who's shown me real loyalty, I interrupted. The only one who cared enough to pay attention, to notice things were wrong. You deserve it, Barbara. And besides, you're going to need resources for the second part of the plan. The second part was more complicated. I needed evidence. Proof of what Nigel and Margaret had been planning. Proof of what they'd done. I had a small recording device in my hospital bag. I'd bought it online 3 weeks ago, back when I first started suspecting that Nigel wasn't quite as loving as he pretended to be. Back before I knew how bad things really were. Barbara would take the device home tonight and hide it somewhere in the house. Somewhere Nigel and Margaret gathered to talk. The sitting room? Probably. Or the kitchen. Somewhere the device could capture their conversations. If they're planning what I think they're planning, they'll talk about it, I said. They think I'll be dead in 2 days. They think they're safe. They'll get careless. And if they find it, then we've lost nothing. I'm dying anyway, Barbara. What can they do to me that's worse than what they've already done? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right. I'll do it. Where's the device? I told her where to find it in my bag. She pulled out the small black object, no bigger than a matchbox, and slipped it into her pocket. There's one more thing, I said. My home office. There's a filing cabinet behind my desk. Bottom drawer, false bottom. Lift the insert and you'll find documents underneath. Property deeds, investment portfolios, account information. Things Nigel doesn't know about because I kept them separate from our joint finances. Photograph everything and send copies to Andrew Fletcher. Barbara's eyes widened. You have secret accounts? I'm not completely stupid, I said, managing a weak smile. I built my business from nothing, Barbara. Before I met Nigel, I was careful, cautious. Then I fell in love and I got softer. But I never quite let go of all my caution. I kept some things separate, Not much, but enough. Enough to make sure that even if Nigel got what was in my will, he wouldn't get everything. Enough to leave Barbara comfortable, even wealthy, if she played this right. The spare key is under the blue pot by the back door, I added. Go tonight, while they're still here at the hospital. They usually stay until visiting hours end at 9. You'll have time. Barbara stood, clutching her handbag tightly. Mrs. Pemberton. Elizabeth, I said. Call me Elizabeth. I think we're past formalities now, don't you? She smiled, though tears were running down her cheeks. Elizabeth, I won't let you down. I know you won't. She left quietly, and I was alone again, with the beeping machines and my dark thoughts. 8 years. 8 years I'd spent loving a man who'd been counting down the days until I died. 8 years building a life with someone who'd only ever seen me as a bank account. How had I missed the signs? Or had there been signs at all? Had Nigel always been this cold, this calculating? Or had he simply been that good at pretending? I thought back to our early days, trying to remember genuine moments. Had any of it been real? Our first date, at that Italian restaurant in Soho. He'd seemed so interested in my work, asking intelligent questions about property development. I'd thought he was fascinated by me. Now I wondered if he'd just been calculating my net worth. Barbara didn't come back that night, which meant she'd made it into the house without being caught. I barely slept, drifting in and out of feverish dreams where Nigel's smile grew wider and wider until it split his face in two. Morning came grey and cold. A nurse brought me breakfast that I couldn't eat, checked my vitals, adjusted my medications. She chatted cheerfully about the weather, about her daughter's upcoming wedding, about nothing important. I smiled and nodded, saving my energy. At 9:30, my door opened, and Andrew Fletcher walked in. He was a tall man, always impeccably dressed, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. We'd known each other for 15 years, ever since I'd bought my first property and needed legal help with the contracts. Over the years, he'd become more than just my solicitor. He was a friend, one of the few real ones I had. His face was grave as he approached my bed. Elizabeth. Andrew. Thank you for coming so quickly. Barbara Collins came to my office an hour ago. He pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down, placing his leather briefcase on his lap. She gave me your letter, and the photographs. And I think you should have told me about your suspicions weeks ago. His voice was gentle but firm. I've never trusted Nigel. I've told you that before. He had. Several times over the years, in subtle ways. Little comments about how Nigel seemed very interested in my portfolio. How odd it was that he'd never gone back to work. How convenient it was that his mother needed a place to stay right after you'd inherited that Kensington property from your aunt. I'd defended Nigel every time, made excuses, insisted Andrew was being unfair, judging Nigel for being less successful in business, for being comfortable letting his wife be the breadwinner. I was a fool, I said quietly. You were in love. That's not the same thing. Andrew opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. I've drawn up a new will based on your instructions. Everything goes to Barbara Collins, with the stipulation that she manage your properties and business interests, taking a 20% share of all profits. When and if you recover, I'm not going to recover, Andrew. He looked at me over his reading glasses. Dr. Thornbury says you have 2 days. That's his worst-case estimate. Medicine isn't an exact science, Elizabeth. I've seen people given days to live who lasted months. Years even. That's kind of you to say, but nothing. This will is written to account for multiple scenarios. If you survive, Barbara becomes your business partner, and you maintain full control of your assets. If you don't, everything transfers to her with your instructions on what to do with it. Either way, Nigel gets nothing. What about the old will? Superseded the moment you sign this one. I'll file it with the courts today. It'll be legal and binding within hours. He handed me a pen. 3 signatures. Here, here, and here. My hand shook as I signed. The pen felt heavy, each letter an effort. But I managed it. 3 signatures that would change everything. Andrew witnessed them, then carefully placed the document back in his briefcase. Now, about the other matter. The photographs Barbara brought me. What did you find? Evidence that your husband has been planning for your death for quite some time. The documents show he's been tracking your assets meticulously. He's even contacted several estate agents about potential sales, though he's been careful not to commit to anything yet. Smart of him, really. Can't sell properties he doesn't own. Yet, I said bitterly. Yet? Andrew agreed. He pulled out his phone and showed me something. This is more concerning. 3 months ago, Nigel took out a loan. £200,000. He used some of your joint properties as collateral. I stared at the screen. How? I never signed anything. Your signature was forged. Not particularly well, either. I'd say you have grounds for fraud charges. Except, he trailed off delicately. Except I'll be dead in 2 days and won't be around to press charges. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I closed my eyes, feeling exhaustion sweep over me. What did he spend it on? I haven't traced all of it yet. But there are significant transfers to an account in Margaret's name, regular payments to what appears to be a private investigator. I'm guessing he was checking to make sure you didn't have any hidden assets, and a rather large payment to a company in Switzerland, where banking was private and questions weren't asked. He's been preparing, I said. Getting everything ready for when I die. It appears so. But Elizabeth, there's something else. Something Barbara mentioned that concerns me deeply. The supplements. Andrew nodded. She said, Margaret has been giving you herbal drinks, daily, for about a year, and that your health has deteriorated significantly during that time. You think she poisoned me? I think it's worth investigating. If you'll permit me, I'd like to have your doctors run some additional tests. Toxicology screens specifically. Look for things they might not have been checking for. Hope, small and fragile, flickered in my chest. And if they find something, then we go to the police. Attempted murder is a serious charge, Elizabeth. Even if, he paused, even if the attempt was successful, they'd still face justice. Do it, I said. Run the tests. Andrew made some calls, speaking in low tones to people whose titles I didn't catch. When he finished, he turned back to me. Dr. Thornbury will be here within the hour. In the meantime, I need to ask you something. The recording device Barbara planted, do you want me to retrieve it? Or should we leave it running? I thought about that. Leave it. The more they talk, the more evidence we have. Barbara's going to pick it up tonight. She's been very brave about all this. She's the only one who has been. Andrew's expression softened. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Sorry that the person you trusted most betrayed you so completely. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. He left shortly after, promising to return once the test results came back. I was alone again, but this time I felt different. Not quite hopeful that would be too much, but less helpless, less like a victim waiting to die. I was fighting back now. Around noon, Nigel and Margaret arrived. They swept into my room like they owned it, which I suppose they thought they did, or would, very soon. Margaret carried a small thermos. I've brought you some broth, dear. The hospital food is dreadful, and you need to keep your strength up. Keep my strength up, so I could live long enough to die on schedule. I'm not hungry, I said. Nonsense. You must eat something. She unscrewed the thermos, and the smell of chicken broth filled the room. It actually smelled quite good, which made it worse somehow. I said I'm not hungry. Margaret's smile didn't waver, but something cold flashed in her eyes. Elizabeth, you're being difficult. I've made this especially for you. Then you drink it. The words hung in the air between us. Nigel, who'd been scrolling through his phone, looked up. Darling, Mother's just trying to help. Is she? I looked directly at Margaret. Then she won't mind having some first, to show me it's safe. Margaret's face went rigid. That's a very strange thing to say. Is it? You've been making special drinks for me for a year now, and I've been getting sicker and sicker. Funny coincidence, don't you think? The room went very quiet. Nigel stood up slowly. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply saying that if the broth is safe, Margaret should have no problem drinking it herself. This is ridiculous, Margaret snapped. She screwed the lid back on the thermos, with sharp, angry movements. I come here out of kindness, trying to care for you in your final hours, and you accuse me of— I haven't accused you of anything, I interrupted. I've just asked you to drink your own broth. If you won't, then I have to wonder why. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. I don't have to justify myself to you. No, I agreed. I suppose you don't. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. Nigel lingered for a moment, his expression unreadable. You're being paranoid, he said finally. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally seeing clearly. He left without another word. I watched the door close behind him and allowed myself a small, grim smile. Let them wonder. Let them worry. The afternoon dragged by in a haze of medication and restless sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Margaret's face when I'd asked her to drink her own broth. The flash of panic, quickly covered by indignation. The way her hands had trembled slightly as she screwed the lid back on. Guilty people always gave themselves away eventually. Around 6 o'clock, Dr. Thornbury came in with several nurses. They drew blood, took samples, asked questions about my symptoms over the past year. He was thorough and professional, but I caught him glancing at me with something that looked like concern mixed with curiosity. Mr. Fletcher mentioned some irregularities he wanted us to investigate, he said carefully. We'll run a full toxicology panel. It'll take a few hours to get preliminary results, possibly until tomorrow for the complete analysis. Thank you. He hesitated at the door. Mrs. Pemberton, if there's something you're not telling me— There's a lot I'm not telling you, Doctor. But if the tests show what I think they'll show, you'll understand why. After he left, I was alone with my thoughts again. The machines beeped their steady rhythm, counting down my heartbeats, each one bringing me closer to the end. Or to the truth. I wasn't sure which anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from Barbara. Got it. Coming tonight after they're asleep. Barbara had retrieved the recording device. Soon I'd know exactly what Nigel and Margaret had been saying when they thought no one was listening. The evening visiting hours came and went. Nigel and Margaret didn't return, which was fine by me. I imagined them at home, in my house, probably arguing about what I'd said, about whether I suspected something, about whether they needed to change their plans. Let them argue. Let them panic. Around 11 o'clock, my door opened quietly. Barbara slipped in, looking nervous and exhausted. She locked the door behind her and hurried to my bedside. I've got it, she whispered, pulling the small recording device from her handbag. There's hours of conversation on here. I listened to some of it in my car. Elizabeth. Her voice cracked. It's bad. It's really bad. Play it. She connected the device to her phone and held it close to my ear. The sound quality was surprisingly clear. I heard dishes clattering, water running, kitchen sounds, then voices. Margaret's voice. She knows something. The way she looked at me today. The things she said. Nigel's voice. She's dying, Mother. Paranoid delusions are common at this stage. Don't be stupid. She asked me to drink the broth. She knows. A pause. Then Nigel. She can't know, there's no way she could know. She suspects. That's enough. We need to be careful. Careful? She's got 2 days left, maybe 1. Then it's over and everything is ours. We just need to wait. I told you those supplements would work. Margaret's voice was smug now. Slow and steady. No one suspects natural organ failure. The doctors just think she's unlucky. Weak constitution. My breath caught in my throat. Barbara's hand found mine and squeezed. Nigel laughed. Actually laughed. A year of watching her drink that poison every morning. You're more patient than I am, Mother. I wanted to just push her down the stairs and be done with it. That's because you're impulsive. You always have been. This way is better. Clean. No investigation, no questions. Just a tragic illness that took a young woman too soon. And I play the grieving husband. You play it very well, darling. Very convincing. Though you nearly gave yourself away today when the doctor said 2 days. I saw your face. You looked positively delighted. Can you blame me? 8 years, Mother. 8 years of pretending to love her. 8 years of listening to her talk about property development and business strategies like I give a damn. 8 years of playing the supportive husband while she built her little empire. Our empire now, Margaret corrected. The Kensington house alone is worth £2.5 million. The Mayfair flat, another £1 million. The Cornwall cottage, the properties in Bath, the commercial buildings in Manchester. She's been very busy, our Elizabeth. Very successful. Very dead soon. They both laughed at that. Barbara stopped the recording. Tears were streaming down her face. There's more. Hours more. They discuss which properties to sell, how to access your accounts, everything. They've planned it all out. They poisoned me, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. For a year. Every morning. She smiled at me and handed me those drinks, and I thanked her. I actually thanked her. The police need to hear this. Not yet. Keep listening. I want to know everything. Barbara fast-forwarded through sections, stopping at relevant parts. I heard them discussing my will, congratulating themselves on convincing me to update it 3 years ago. I heard Margaret mention how she'd researched various poisons before settling on one that mimicked natural organ failure. I heard Nigel describe exactly how he'd forged my signature on loan documents, but the worst part came near the end of the recording. Last night's conversation, after they'd left the hospital. Margaret. She's lasting longer than I expected. I thought we'd be done by now. Nigel. Should you increase the dose? She's not taking the supplements anymore. She hasn't been for 3 days. I tried to give her the broth today, but she refused. 3 days. Nigel sounded alarmed. Will that be enough? What if she starts to recover? She won't. The damage is already done. Her organs are failing. It's just a matter of time now. But what if... Stop panicking. Even if by some miracle she survives the next few days, she'll never fully recover. She'll be weak, sickly, dependent on medical care for the rest of her life. Either way, we win. Barbara turned off the recording. We sat in silence for a long moment. They deserve to rot in prison, Barbara said finally. Both of them. They will, I promised. But first, we need the toxicology results. The recording proves intent, but we need medical evidence to prove they actually poisoned me. Mr. Fletcher said the results should be ready by morning. Morning. I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Morning was just hours away. Go home, Barbara. Get some sleep. You'll need your strength for tomorrow. I don't want to leave you alone. I'll be fine. There are nurses right outside, and Nigel and Margaret won't try anything here. Too many witnesses. I managed a weak smile. Besides, I'm too angry to die. Spite is keeping me alive at this point. Barbara laughed despite herself. I believe it. After she left, I lay in the darkness, thinking about everything I'd heard. A year of poison, 8 years of lies, a marriage built on nothing but greed and calculation. I'd loved Nigel. Truly loved him. I'd believed in us, in our future together. I'd welcomed his mother into my home, tried to be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law, and they'd been planning my death the entire time. The anger I felt was cold and sharp, nothing like the hot fury of a moment's rage. This was calculated, controlled. They'd plotted against me with patience and care. Now I would return the favour. My phone buzzed. A text from Andrew Fletcher. Preliminary results are back. You need to see this. Coming first thing in the morning. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind was too busy, too active, planning and preparing. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Nigel and Margaret would discover that I wasn't as helpless as they thought. Tomorrow, the dying woman in the hospital bed would rise up and destroy them both. I just had to survive until morning. Dawn came slowly, grey light creeping across the hospital room floor. I'd barely slept, my mind too sharp despite my body's weakness. Every beep of the machines felt like a countdown, but not to my death anymore. To justice. Andrew Fletcher arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, Dr. Thornbury, right behind him. They closed the door and pulled chairs close to my bed. Their faces told me everything before they said a word. We found it, Doctor, Thornbury said quietly. In your blood, your tissue samples, a substance called thallium. It's a heavy metal, extremely toxic in small repeated doses, causes exactly the kind of organ failure you've been experiencing. How much? I asked. Enough to kill you slowly over time. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The dosage was carefully calculated to mimic natural illness. If we hadn't been specifically looking for toxins, he shook his head, we would never have found it. But you did find it. And now I can prove what they did. Andrew leaned forward. Elizabeth, with this evidence and the recording, we have enough for the police. More than enough. I've already contacted Detective Inspector Walsh. She's on her way here now. What happens next? You give your statement. They'll arrest Nigel and Margaret, probably today. The Crown Prosecution Service will build a case for attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy. With the evidence we have, it's almost certain they'll be convicted. And me? I looked at Dr. Thornbury. What about me? His expression softened. You're going to live, Elizabeth. Now that we know what's poisoning you, we can treat it. You'll need chelation therapy to remove the thallium from your system. It'll take months, possibly years to fully recover. The damage to your organs is significant. But you're young, you're strong, and you're going to survive this. I was going to live. The words didn't quite register at first. For days I'd been preparing to die, accepting it, planning around it. And now, suddenly, I had a future again. 2 days, I said, remembering Dr. Thornbury's original prognosis. You said I had 2 days. That was, if your condition continued to deteriorate, but we've stopped the source of the poison. Your body can start healing now. He smiled. You're going to need a lot of rest, a lot of treatment, but yes, you're going to live. Tears burned in my eyes. Not sad tears this time. Angry tears. Relieved tears. Tears for everything I'd lost and everything I'd almost lost and everything I was going to take back. Detective Inspector Walsh arrived half an hour later. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, with grey-streaked hair and a no-nonsense manner. She listened to everything, my statement, the recording, the medical evidence. She took notes, asked questions, showed no reaction except for a slight tightening around her mouth when she heard Nigel's voice on the recording saying he'd wanted to push me down the stairs. We'll bring them in today, she said when I'd finished. With your permission, I'd like to do it here. In this room. Why here? Because I want to see their faces when they realize you're not dying. When they understand that you know everything. She met my eyes. You've been through hell, Mrs. Pemberton. You deserve to see justice start to happen. I nodded. Do it. They came at 10 o'clock. Nigel walked in first, looking annoyed at being summoned so early. Margaret followed, her handbag clutched primly in front of her. They both stopped short when they saw the room, full of people. Andrew, Dr. Thornbury, Detective Inspector Walsh, 2 uniformed officers. What's all this? Nigel demanded. Mr. Nigel Pemberton. Mrs. Margaret Pemberton. Detective Inspector Walsh stepped forward, her voice formal and cold. I'm arresting you both on suspicion of attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. The colour drained from Nigel's face. Margaret made a small sound, like air escaping from a balloon. This is absurd, Nigel said, but his voice shook. Attempted murder? My wife is dying of organ failure. Natural causes. Ask the doctors. We did ask the doctors, Walsh replied. They found thallium in her system, a poison that's been administered repeatedly over approximately 1 year, causing the exact symptoms of organ failure your wife has been experiencing. Margaret's handbag slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a thud. You also might be interested to know, Walsh continued, pulling out her phone, that we have a recording of you both discussing the poisoning in detail. Would you like to hear it? She pressed play. Nigel's voice filled the room. A year of watching her drink that poison every morning. You're more patient than I am, Mother. Nigel lunged toward me then, his face twisted with rage. The uniformed officers grabbed him before he could reach my bed. He struggled against them, shouting words I couldn't quite make out through the roaring in my ears. Margaret just stood there perfectly still, her face blank. She looked at me with those cold grey eyes and said, You were supposed to die. I know, I said quietly, but I didn't. And now you're going to prison for the rest of your life. Everything was supposed to be ours. We waited. We planned. We did everything right. You poisoned me. You killed me slowly, day by day, with a smile on your face. That's not doing things right. That's evil. Something flickered in her expression then. Not remorse, not guilt, just disappointment. Like a child whose carefully built tower of blocks had been knocked over. They took them away in handcuffs. Nigel was still shouting, making threats and denials. Margaret went silently, her head held high, acting like she was simply leaving a disappointing dinner party. The room emptied slowly. Dr. Thornbury left to begin arranging my treatment. The officers left to process the arrests. Andrew stayed for a few minutes, making sure I was all right. Then he left too, with promises to handle all the legal details. Finally, it was just Barbara and me. She sat beside my bed, holding my hand, both of us crying. Not sad tears, relief, justice, survival. You saved my life, I said. You saved both our lives, she replied. You gave me a future I never dreamed of having. Partners, I said. That's what Andrew's will says. When I recover, we'll be partners. The business needs someone who actually cares about it, not someone who just sees it as a pile of money to spend. Partners, Barbara agreed, smiling through her tears. The days that followed were long and difficult. The chelation therapy made me sick. The recovery was slow and painful, but I was alive. I was going to stay alive. Nigel and Margaret were charged with attempted murder. The trial wouldn't happen for months, but Andrew assured me the evidence was overwhelming. They would be convicted. They would spend decades in prison. 6 months later, I was sitting in a cottage by the sea, far from the house where I'd almost died. The house had been sold, the money given to charity. I never wanted to see it again. Barbara visited often, bringing updates on the properties, on the business. We'd hired a proper management team, but she oversaw everything. Making decisions I'd taught her to make, she was good at it. Natural. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Barbara poured us both tea, settling into the chair beside mine. The Bath properties sold, she said. Good price, too. And the Manchester buildings? Fully leased. Excellent tenants. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the waves. I keep thinking about that moment, I said eventually, when Nigel smiled and said I had 2 days, when he thought he'd won. He was wrong, Barbara said simply. He was. I smiled, tasting salt air and freedom. He smiled when he thought I was dying. That was his mistake. What do you mean? Never trust someone who smiles when they think you're dying, I said softly. But always trust someone who cries. Barbara had cried that night in the hospital. Real tears for someone she cared about. Nigel had smiled, and that smile had cost him everything, his freedom, his future, his mother. He'd get nothing from me except the satisfaction of knowing he'd spend the next 20 years behind bars, thinking about the fortune that had been so close he could taste it. 2 days, he'd said. 2 days until everything was his. He'd been right about the 2 days. Just wrong about what they'd bring. They'd brought justice. They'd brought truth. And they'd brought me back from the edge of death. Angry enough and strong enough to make sure he paid for every single lie. I raised my teacup to the sunset, to survival, to second chances, to the future I'd almost lost and fought so hard to reclaim.